Good afternoon. This is a short news brief. There is a new poll that came out, and it says that 58% of Californians say they'd be better off if California peacefully seceded. That new poll is out from the Independent California Institute. The Independent California Institute has been around for a few years now. It's headed by a man known as Coyote Cordonez Marin. And he has been in the Calexit movement from the very beginning, even before we started Sovereign California. And he asked YouGOV, an official polling organization, to conduct this poll, and YouGOV came up with the 58% number. We're going to cover how realistic that is. We're going to get into it right now. So let me go to, here we go. So a new poll suggests that support for Calexit, California's potential secession from the United States, could be much larger than previously reported by the press. Press released by us here at Calexit LLC, a new poll conducted by YouGOV at the request of Coyote Cordonez Marin, director for the Independent California Institute, indicates that a majority of adults, 58%, believe California would be better off if the state peacefully seceded from the U.S. within the next 10 years. As reported by the organization, here, quote, a clear majority said he'd be better off peacefully seceded some point in the next 10 years. Marin has been involved in the Calexit movement since its inception. I personally testify to that. He was part of a group called the California Freedom Coalition, which successfully filed a ballot initiative for California secession. So he's been there from the beginning, and he's filed an initiative for secession. Big work. I think he also wrote an article for a journal in Sacramento called Fox and Hounds, which was a policy journal, also very impressive. He is recognized as a significant figure in the movement, known for their understanding. He goes by they, them, of the complexities involved in socio-political movements like Calexit. Marin has always been one of the big thinkers in the movement and has a knack for the complexities involved in the socio-political movement, such as this Jason Wright, head of Calexit LLC. Marin was involved in Calexit from the beginning, added Marcus Ruiz Evans. I remember he came down to Fresno, California, and met me at the chicken pie shop when we were just getting started with secession. He didn't want to join the organizations, but he was very interested at the beginning. So the guy was there from day one before we even had organizations going. He was there at our proto-fetal stage. This is the poll that came out from the Independent California Institute. The top line results are coming out soon. The poll was conducted by YouGOV of randomly chosen California adults from February 5th to 14th, and cross tabs by demographic groups, and the raw data will be published in early March. This is proof. There's Marin. He was part of the California Freedom Coalition. And this is an article in 8/21/2017 where they're talking about how they're going to file an initiative for California autonomy from the federal government. Preserve California is exactly the sort of approach we had in mind when we wrote the language in our initiative, calling for our state government to buffer Californians against chaos, dysfunction, and uncertainty at the federal level, said Marin, Director of Research and Policy for the California Freedom Coalition. So there's proof. 2017, they were filing initiatives. Here's him in 2020. The Independent California Institute was formed, and he was giving a very detailed factual breakdown from the California Independent Institute on what it means to be a donor state. And that was in 2020, so he's been at it for a while. Now let's get into the meat and potatoes. The accuracy of the 58% figure is questioned in light of previous polls for California secession. So I've already received 2 phone calls from 2 different reporters where they asked me to break this down and say if it was reasonable or not. What I said was that it's possible. I personally feel it's a little bit high, but it could be possible. And I think their survey is definitely within the realms of being methodologically correct. I'll break all that down. So hold on, it's a mixed bag, okay? Not criticizing, not commending, trying to take a neutral stance and explain to everybody why we think what we think, and I'm going to go through the data in detail. 1 second. Okay, everything's going well. Oops. So the first news is that a poll was conducted by Ipsos for Reuters News in January 2017. And it reported that 32% of Californians supported secession. This was the famous time where they were saying a third of Californians support secession. So that started news first with the Ipsos Reuters News poll. However, a clarification revealed that 15.5% of Californians were unsure, meaning that 47.5% were not outright opposed to the possibility of secession. Stanford University's Hoover Institute also conducted a poll also in January 2017 and found that 27% of respondents supported Calexit, with 19% unsure, indicating 46% were not opposed to secession. So Reuters and Stanford, January 2017, both do polls on Calexit. They ask, are you for it? Are you against it? Or do you not know and you're unsure? Now, the news only reported the amount that said they were for it. That leads the public to believe that everybody who wasn't for it must be against it. But that's not what the surveys asked, and that's not what they found. They found that when you add the people who are for it plus the people who are unsure, meaning they're not immediately opposed to something as dramatic as secession, it rises to about 47.5, 40 for Reuters, Ipsos, and 46% for Stanford University's Hoover Institute of people who are not opposed to secession. They did not say no. They said, I'm not sure or I am for it. That's almost half. This was almost never reported. What I'd like to point out is that in 2017, we have two surveys. The Reuters Ipsos survey is 1.5% off from the Stanford University survey. 47.5% is 1.5% off from 46%. So both of these surveys are basically coming up with the same number in 2017, that really we're talking about just under half are not opposed to secession and are willing to discuss it. There it is. The 46% number from Stanford is only 1.5% off from the 47% number from Reuters Ipsos. Despite attempts to clarify the data, mainstream media largely overlooked the larger numbers of 47.5, 46 for conditional support of Calexit. Only GQ magazine, in an article called The California Secession Movement's Ecstatic Rise and Unexpected Collapse by Daniel Riley, mentioned this number at all. So I emailed 30 different reporters. I walked them through all the data. Only GQ magazine in this article would report on the statistic. 30 other reporters wouldn't touch it, even though it was true and was always in the data for these two surveys. Ipsos and Reuters poll asked, do you support or oppose the idea of your state peacefully withdrawing from the United States of America and the federal government, and provided a range of options from strongly support to 10 to opposed to don't know. Additionally, Stanford University, when asked this question, an initiative might appear on the November 2018 ballot, calling for a special election to decide if California should declare independence from the U.S. If that election were held today, would you vote for or against California declaring its independence to be its own country? However, they provided for, against, and not sure. So both of these surveys, Reuters Ipsos, provided three options. And the Stanford University survey provided three options. The mainstream press never reported on that. This leads the public to conclude that if only 32% of Californians said yes, then it must mean 60% of Californians were against. That's not what either poll actually asked, but you never saw that in the news. This is going to come up again. The discrepancies do not end there, though. Both the Reuters Ipsos and Stanford Hoover surveys had a problem with collecting enough respondents, so they had to make adjustments to make the surveys work. So we're going through a time where not that many people have landlines, and polls were typically done through landlines. So when they can't get enough landline respondents, they inflate the numbers through calculations to try to estimate what they think people would have said in order to fill out the survey. This happens a lot. It's not wrong to do this, but they did it incorrectly. Both Reuters and Stanford did not correctly represent the true picture of California demographics profile when they were making adjustments to the surveys. There's the poll from Reuters Ipsos, 1/25/2017. There's the question, etc. That's the official poll that came out that day. Reuters methodology problems. They incorrectly counted the amount of different demographic groups that existed in California during the time of the survey. Survey was interviewed by all adults across America, not voters and not just in California. Here's the background data for survey. For Reuters, they broke it down into 4 demographic groups. So they surveyed everybody and they broke it down into only 4 groups: Asian, white, black, and Latino. And what they said was Asians, about 45.6% of all Asians oppose secession for California, 61% of all whites oppose secession for California, 48.2% of all blacks, black African-American people oppose secession for California, and 44% of Latinos oppose secession for California. Now pay attention to this number. Okay, 61% of white people oppose California secession, but only 44% of Latinos oppose California secession. Okay, now the survey listed them as 9% of this survey. They're only 5.6% of the population of America. That's wrong. The survey listed white people as 76% of the population. In reality, they're only 73% of the population, which means they overcounted white people by 4% in the survey. The survey listed African Americans as 14%. In reality, they're 13%. That's pretty close. Here you go. The survey listed as 9% Latinos. In reality, they're 18% of the USA. They were undercounted by 50%. So Caucasian people, who have the most hatred of California secession at 61%, were overcounted. And Latino people, who have the most favorable position to California secession, were undercounted by 50%. The survey listed them as 90% of the survey population. In reality, they were 18% of the USA at that year. So when we redo the numbers with the California population based on 2017 demographics of California, and we keep the same amount of opposition. So Asians are 14.7% of the California population times 45.6% of them opposed, as we saw up here. Caucasians are 36%, African Americans are 6%, Latinos are damn near 40%, highest percentage, and we kept the opposed. So Latinos, 39% of the population, that's correct, times 44% opposed, which came from here, equals 17.16% of California opposed. Caucasian people at 36.8% of the population times 61% opposed, as we see here, equals 22% of California opposed. So when we add all these up, 6.7% Asians, 22% Caucasians, 3% African Americans, 70.16% of Latinos equals 49.3% of California opposed secession, which means that actually 50.7 was not opposed. So when we add all this up correctly of who's opposed based upon the opposition numbers they gave here, but we corrected for the size of the California population correctly for that year, what we get is 49.3% of Californians opposed secession, which means that 50.7% of California was not opposed, or close to 51%. This is key. Remember this number, that the Reuters methodology problems, when we corrected for them, ended up with 51% basically not opposed to secession. Okay. Now let's look at Stanford. Here's the Stanford poll. There it is. Stanford did the exact same thing. The survey methodology was based on only California adults from the 2010 census profile of California. However, the survey was done in 2017. Almost a decade later, the census profile had changed. They were using outdated census profiles. Now, Stanford did something interesting. They asked, do you support California independence? And then they asked, do you support California secession? And what they found is that when you use the word secession, support went up higher. So here we go. Here's the Stanford methodology. Using the word secession, white people 58% oppose, African Americans 61% oppose, 44% Latinos oppose, 63% oppose. So the survey said they were 432 people out of 763 respondents for the total survey, equals 56.6% of the population of the survey. So the Stanford survey is giving white people who oppose at 58%, 56.6% of the survey. In California, they were only 37% of the population that year. Again, they gave them 8.5% for African Americans in the survey. They're only 6% in reality. They gave Latinos only 27%, 20.7% of the population in the survey. California population reality, they're 39%. Once again, right here, Latinos are cut in half, right there. Only 158 people out of 763 survey respondents equals 20.7% of the population of that survey. Latinos are actually 39% of the population of California. Latinos are the most supportive of secession. Caucasian people are the least supportive of secession. Yet here we go. Caucasian people, well, I guess African Americans are, but Caucasian people definitely are way less supportive of secession than Latinos. Here we go. They're counted as 50.6% of the population in the survey. They're only 37% in California in reality. Latinos were counted as 20.7% of the population in the survey. In reality, they're 39%. So once again, white people are overcounted. Their reality is they're 37% of the population. Stanford listed them as 56.6. That's not accurate. Stanford then listed Latinos as half of their population they are in reality, 20.7, when in reality it's 39%. So do you see a pattern here? Here's the Reuters one. Latinos undercounted 50%. Caucasian people overcounted. Latinos most supportive of secession. Caucasian people least supportive of secession. Okay, that's the Reuters one. Let's go to Stanford. Stanford. Caucasian people overcounted. Stanford. Latin people undercounted by 50%. Both surveys did the exact same thing. Now, when we correct this, and we actually do, white is 37% of the population times the actual amount that they posed equals the percentage that was actually posed. So what we find is that when you add these up, oh yeah, this is, so this is without the word secession, and this is with the word secession. Without the word secession, with the word secession, without the word secession, with the word secession, without the word secession, with the word secession. There's a slight difference. So when you add these up, 21 plus 3 plus 17.9 equals 50% opposed while using the word secession, meaning 50% are not opposed to secession when you use the word. So again, they undercounted Latin people by 50%, and they overcounted white people who are very opposed. They undercounted Latinos who are very supportive in both surveys. When you actually correct this for Stanford, what you get is about 50% are not opposed to secession. When you actually correct the numbers to match the demographics. That was the other one. If you're not using the word secession, there's actually less support for secession. So now here's the other thing. The most recent survey by YouGOV for the Independent California Institute, which is what we're talking about today, was conducted by February 5th to 13th, 2024, included 530 California-based respondents and correctly matched the survey to the accurate demographics of California using the American Community Survey. So my understanding is that this survey by the ICI doesn't make the mistake that Reuters and Stanford both did in 2017 and actually accurately correctly matched the California demographics as they exist now. However, this survey by YouGOV for the Independent California Institute said that the margin of error was 5.6, which means that the support for secession could actually be as low as 52.4. As it was explained to me by Jason Wright, that also means that if it's 58% and the margin of error is 5.6, you could be looking at 63.6, it's almost 64%. So it could go as low as 52.4% to damn near 64%. That's the range. So the margin of error for this survey that says 58% is 5.6, which means the survey results could actually technically be 52.4. 52.4 is very close to the 50% by Stanford and the 51% by Reuters when the demographics are corrected. That was the whole point. Yes, they say in this new survey for by YouGOV for the Independent California Institute that it's 58%, but they also say it's a margin of error 5.6, which means it could be as low as 52.4 who support secession. 52.4 who support secession by this new ICI poll for YouGOV, very close to the 50% found by Stanford who are not opposed to secession, and the 51% found by Reuters who are not opposed to secession when we correctly match the demographics. Remember, 50% are not opposed to secession. That was from Stanford. Close to 51% are not opposed to secession. That was from Reuters. Reuters, Stanford. Stanford, Reuters, new survey. So the new survey is 52.4 versus 51. We're looking at a margin of error about 1.4, maybe 2.4, 1 to 2 percentage points difference between the new YouGOV poll for ICI, Independent California Institute, and the Stanford Hoover poll and the Reuters Ipsos poll done in 2017. That was the whole point. So these polls actually match at the lower end of the spectrum. However, it is possible that 58% support for Calexit in California may indeed be accurate, suggesting a potential growth in support over the years since 2017. According to Jason Wright, a member of the Calexit movement, support may have grown all these years quietly in the background. True. Marcus Ruiz Evans, myself, said we haven't had many surveys between 2017 and 2024, so it's hard to tell. That's also a fact. However, the possibility of a Donald Trump return to the presidency in the next election adds complexity to the situation. A Trump victory in 2024 would suggest that the majority of Americans, including those outside of California, support his values. In 2016, Trump's election was somewhat mitigated for Californians by the fact that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, indicating that a majority of Americans did not align with Trump's values. However, if Trump were to win a second term, Californians would have to confront the reality that they share a country with the majority of the population outside California that does not share their values. Regardless of whether Trump wins the popular vote in 2024, his election for a second term would underscore his appeal to a significant portion of Americans, and Californians would have to come to accept a reality they dismissed in 2016. This realization could potentially increase support for secession among many Californians, as many would see it as a way to disassociate from a political landscape they do not align with. So 58 could be true. Here's why. We haven't had surveys, so it's kind of hard to tell, but Donald Trump could be elected again. In 2016, we were told he, didn't really represent America. A majority of Americans backed Hillary Clinton. So, hey, California, you don't have to worry. It's not that America supports Trump values. A majority of them don't. Now, if he wins again, even if he doesn't win the popular vote, Californians are going to have to deal with the reality they quickly sloughed off, which is America likes this guy and they like his values, which means even if he loses the popular vote in 2024, the fact is that Hillary won the popular vote in 2016 because of California alone, which means outside of California, a majority of the American population in 2016 backed Trump. If Trump wins again and Biden, let's say, wins the popular vote, but only by California, it means the same thing again, that in 2024, when you look outside of California, a majority of America does not share your values. In 2016, Californians could regard Trump's election as a fluke and write it off. If he wins a second time, they're going to have to deal with the reality they pushed off. America likes Trump, America shares his values, and America prefers him over whatever you're selling California. That could shock the hell out of people. And the fact that Trump has been shown to survive all his court cases, which many Californians found an exceptional announcement of reality, it could show a massive increase. So a lot of Californians thought he would be done. They thought the legal system would take him out. They thought he would never get this far. He's survived almost all the legal challenges so far. He looks like he's going to be the nominee despite all the legal roadblocks, and he could be the president. That reality is shocking Californians right now. the shock of dealing with the fact that Trump could be president again and what that means for America could be enough to increase California's support to 58%. Remember, we were talking about how, give it a second here. We were talking about how, 50.7 were not opposed to secession, and then 50% are not opposed to secession, and that the number for the YouGOV poll could be 52.4%, and this is very close to the 50% by Stanford and 51% by Reuters. So if the population of people who was supporting secession was 50 and 51% in 2017, it's possible that it could have grown to 58% between 2017 and 2024. It's almost 8 years, and people could be very terrified about the return of Trump, and that could explain the growth. It's possible. I want to be very clear. This is possible. Now, here's another survey we had to point out. This came out by YouGOV. It's another YouGOV poll. It's not the one done by the Independent California Institute. This is by Taylor Orth, and it came out on February 14, 2024. States whose residents are most likely to support secession: Alaska, Texas, California. And what they say is that California secession is about 29%. Now, here's the interesting thing. They list California's support for secession at 29%. Okay. Like the Stanford and Reuters polls, though, they did not ask, do you support it and do you not? They asked 3 questions. Do you support it? No, or are you not sure? Literally the same format that Stanford and Reuters did. Not 2 questions, but 3. Yes, no, not sure. So but they only reported on the yes. So when we look at this poll and they go, 29% of Californians support secession. Okay. That's from the yes category. How many said not sure from California? We don't know. We just know that they said yes, no, not sure. So when we look at this poll and it's 29% support for California secession, and there's another crosstab, I didn't bring it up here, but it showed it by regions. And when you look at the region for the West, it shows it at 25% not sure. So the West is 25% not sure. 25% plus 29% is 54%. So here you go. It should be mentioned that there's another recent poll conducted by YouGov titled "The States Whose Residents Are Most Likely to Support Secession" by Taylor Orth, released, found California secession at 29%. However, what wasn't reported, similar to Stanford and Reuters polls, is that this poll offered a range of responses from yes, no to not sure. When examining the crosstabs for the survey and selecting data displayed by region, it's broken up into 4 demographic groups. The West tab for this survey says 25% and 25% for not sure. Now, typically in surveys, the term West refers to California, collection of other West Coast states, with California usually comprising about 80% of the population for the West alone. YouGov has not released the specific number of people who said not sure for California, and requests for this information have not been responded to. We've made many requests, can't get a response. However, if we assume that California represents the majority of the West tab, and yes for the West was 25%, while the survey stated that California was at 29%. So if you go to the survey and you click it open by regions, the West is listed at 25% support for secession, yet California, according to the survey, is listed at 29%. So it's higher than the regional background. It's plausible that the proportion of people who said don't know for California in the survey could be 25% or higher. If support for California secession is reported at 29%, but the percentage of Californians who are not sure is 25%, then this implies that 54% of Californians are not immediately opposed or willing to discuss secession, a figure very close to the 58% provided by the Independent California Institute. So they asked yes, no, not sure. California in the regional tab was listed at 25% yes. However, the survey said that California supported secession at 29%. So California was higher than its regional total. If the not sure amount for the regional section for the West is 25%, how can we not assume that the California percentage may also be higher? We simply don't know. The not sure section for California could be 2%, maybe. However, it's also very likely that it's 25%. And if we add 25%, which is the standard not sure for the entire West for the crosstab, then we get to 54%. 29% for secession, 25% who said not sure. Now, it might be not 25%. It could be very lower. It could also be higher, because the amount of people who said yes for secession in the West was 25%, but the amount of people who said yes for secession in California was, the amount of people who said yes for secession in the West was 25%, but the amount of people who said yes for secession in California was 29%, 4 percentage points higher. So it could also be higher, the percentage who's not sure. If that's true, this may be above 54% and could go as high as 58%. So there may be two YouGOV polls out right now that back this 58% number. One directly provided by YouGOV to the Independent California Institute, and the other the separate independent YouGOV poll that has not released the not sure figures. We simply don't know. But if the not sure figures for California are 25% or higher, which is plausible, then we're looking at 54% are not opposed. That's real close to the 58% by the California Independence Institute. Okay, and let me skip ahead real quick. This is roughly what we're looking at. I want to give me 1 second here. This is roughly what we're looking at. So the Reuters Ipsos poll, the Stanford poll, came in at 50% not opposed to secession. The Reuters Ipsos poll is the next one. It came in at 50.7% not opposed to secession. And then finally, we have the YouGOV poll that possibly maybe came in at 54% not opposed to secession. We have to find out what the not sure score is. And finally, we have the YouGOV poll for Independent California Institute at 58%. So these four surveys, when the demographics are corrected, seem to show support for Calexit over half the population. That's why I wanted to do this show. You're going to hear 32% support Calexit. That must mean 2/3 are against. That was never the case. We showed you that with Reuters and Stanford. And the new YouGOV poll out recently also asked 3 tabs, but we can't get that other information. It's very plausible that when you look at the surveys this way, that the low end for the ICI survey at about 52% could be very accurate, but 58% could also be accurate if we look at growth. And it matches a larger pattern of when we look at the numbers correctly, we're looking at actually half or over half of the population of California is not opposed to secession and open to discussing it. Finally, just to finish up, 2017, the Calexit movement exploded. We almost got bigger than the California Democratic Party on Facebook. Despite that, we were hurt by rumors of Russia collusion. We lost a lot of members. So I took about 300 angry phone calls from 2017 to 2018 of people screaming about how mad they were about the Russia rumor, but not one of those people said they stopped believing it was a good idea. So people left because of the Russia rumors, but they never left the movement because of the idea. I never met anybody who said I stopped believing, and I talked to more people than anyone. So let's go back to this YouGOV poll, the states whose residents most likely to support secession. It says 31% or 29% support secession. That is very close to the 31% from before, or 32%. So the 29% who support secession in this new poll closely aligns with figures by Stanford, 27%, and Reuters 32% in 2017, indicating that the supports for secession may have been consistent over the past 8 years. 29% by the new YouGOV poll is literally in between 27% for Stanford and 32% for Reuters. So a big amount of overlap. Why are we still seeing about 1/3 of the California population outright supporting secession, as they did almost 8 years prior. Unless our theory was correct. People may have left the movement because of rumors, but no one ever stopped believing in the idea. We said that for years. We didn't have proof. It was just a feeling we had from talking to the members who left. We said people left for rumors, but they never stopped believing California independence was a good idea. This new poll by YouGOV showing 29% for California secession, almost tied from the numbers from 2017, backs that up. It appears that we have lost nobody who supports this idea. Do they want to work with us? I don't know. But do they still believe California would be better off as a nation? Yes. This poll backs that up. So those numbers haven't changed in 8 years, basically. But that's not it. All of it. I'll give it 1 second here. So this is a new poll. LA Times, half of U.S. says California declining, 30% of Democrats say too liberal. This is a new poll by the Center Square, released February 24th, entitled "Half of USA Says California Declining." More than half of Republicans expressing a view that California isn't truly American. The sentiment indicates the animosity towards Californians from Republicans, which could potentially allow California to win a national vote for peaceful secession, remains as strong as it was in 2017. So we have this poll saying the same amount of Californians support secession today as they did in 2016. And then we have this poll showing that half of Republicans hate California and don't believe that it's American. That's the same amount of hatred against California as we saw in 2017. So the amount of support domestically for Calexit hasn't changed, and the amount of support outside of California to leave America hasn't changed. And that's key because we have to ask for permission to leave. Given that support inside California and outside California for Calexit is as strong as it was in 2016-17, it is possible that faith in the idea of a California being independent has not receded in 8 years. Now it appears is the true beginning of the call to freedom for the people of California Republic. This series of polling has shown us that what it takes for Californians to understand, lead, or inspire other Californians, concluded by Jason Wright. This press release was put together by Jason Wright, CEO of Calexit LLC, current head of the former Yes California Calexit members, and myself, host of the official Yes California Calexit channel on YouTube, and founder of the Calexit movement, 2012, with the book California's Next Century 2.0. Here's the sources. 58% of Californians say they'd be better off California peacefully seceded. Those states whose residents are most likely to support secession, by Taylor Orth for YouGOV. Would your state support seceding from the U.S.? This is the byline page for that. And LA Times poll, half of the USA says California is seceding, declining, and support for California secession more than reported before. This is where I found the Stanford and Reuters survey questions. And let me pop out of this. I want to show you guys, there it is. Hold on 1 second. Give it a moment, sorry. Just a second, sorry about this. Let's do it this way. That's the tab. So if you look at region and you go by region and you look at the West, it's 25% not sure for the West versus, and 25% yes. So this is what I was saying about the YouGov poll. If 25% was yes for regional background for the West, but California was 29%, then why is it out of line to assume that 25% is the background for the West and California could also have a higher percentage of not sure, which means it could be in 54% range. We just don't know. They have not released the numbers. So we'll leave it there. That is the press release for today. Wanted to make sure to cover it in detail for all of you. We will be releasing the press release on our Twitter channel on Monday, but this is the deep dive, walking through the methodology so everyone can clearly understand it. And we want to say thank you to everybody for your time.